There ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. When I hear that trumpet sound, I'm gonna rise right out of the ground. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, look way down the river. What do you think I see? I see a band of angels, and they're coming after me. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, look down yonder, Gabriel. Put your feet on the land and see. But Gabriel, don't you blow your trumpet till you hear from me. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. Ain't no grave can hold my body down.
All right. Okay, Floss. Okay, just letting everybody know where our recent court cases are. And as you know, I've gone to the court. I will let you know that that song there was by Johnny Cash, right? And it's a very interesting song because what it says is, look, don't, oh, now I've forgotten the lyrics, but don't hear from me until you've heard, till Gabriel comes. All right, so wait for Gabriel to come. Wait a minute, I'll find it for you what it actually says. But wait for Gabriel to come, and then after, hold on just a minute. So anyway, Kate Floss here, and I'm here to tell you about the 1688 Bill of Rights, and I've been fighting for it in the courts for a very long time, and we're almost at the point where we can use it. It's always been there for us. It's always been part of our common law, our written common law, for many, many, many hundreds of years, but we've forgotten about it. Not only have we forgotten about it, but all of our governments have been working repugnantly to it for several decades, and that's why we've got so much trouble in the world. But if we figured out, if we got the governments to use our 1688, Will and Mary again, as they should be doing it, and ruling over us in peace and tranquility and in unity, if they were doing all of those things that they should be, and no foreigners can govern over us, such as United Nations laws, all of those things, if they were doing those things, we wouldn't have the problem. Now that's what Johnny Cash said. He said, look down yonder, Gabriel, put your feet on the land and see. But Gabriel, don't you blow your trumpet till you heard from me. That's what he says. Look down yonder, Gabriel, put your feet on the land and see. But Gabriel, don't blow your trumpet until you hear from me. I've got to hear this somewhere. And so I believe that everything that's happening now at this time is biblical. Now, I went into the courts during the time of the COVID, and I said to everybody, look, if we get this 1688 Bill of Rights, although it is there, it's part of our law, it's part of UK law, Scotland law, Ireland law, New Zealand law, Australian law, Canadian law. It is not a part of American law. Americans have got inalienable rights, whereas all of us had our alien status removed and we got indubitable rights under God. They're very, very, very different. America decided to leave England. They severed them. They threw them out. They cut them out because they wanted all the taxes for themselves. But that's not the same for our other country. So that's what I've been fighting for in the courts. Now, I did go into the courts, and if you have a look here, so I'll show you this one here. So I went into the courts, and the judgment of Cook J, and I got a strikeout. Now, I made several prayers, but I won't talk about all of those prayers. but I'll talk a little bit about them. But in prayer number 2, I said, I do pray. Now, when you go into the court with the declaration, with the 1688 Bill of Rights, when you go in there asking for a declaration, you don't go in there accusing anyone. You pray for a declaration that this is your right. And the court will make the declaration and order. They will order the Governor General. Now listen carefully here to what happens. They will order the Governor General and they will order all ministers in the Parliament to stand down. That's what they'll do. And so I went in, and it's the only law in the world where you enter the Parliament and you go in on a prayer. Whoa, living on a prayer. And I said, I do pray a declaration to the effect, clearly stating the applicant's ancient 1688 subjects' rights under Almighty God exist. Now, don't worry about the pursuant, because that's something to do with New Zealand. But I wanted them to acknowledge, because we know that it's part of our legislation. We know that they're supposed to govern us by it, but we know that they haven't been. And so I wanted to elevate it back to its rightful position. I call it the will of Jesus. Now I want you to look here at the 4th prayer. I do pray a declaration that every particular of the New Zealand Parliament, including high courts and all ministers, to dispense with laws and exercise of late in clear language, and particularly the 1688 Subjects Bill of Rights New Zealand, or the 1990 New Zealand Bill of Rights, or Fundamental Bill of Rights New Zealand, and to avoid the confusion that has been cruelly and deceptively dispensed of late. What I was basically saying to them here is that they often use this word here, they often use Bill of Rights by itself, and a lot of people don't realise that there is only one supreme law, and that is the 1688 Subjects Bill of Rights, and that applies in England, Scotland, Ireland, Canada, and New Zealand. But this is called the 1990 Bill of Rights, and this 1990 Bill of Rights is an act, and this one here can be changed. Now, the 1688 cannot be changed by an act of Parliament, but the 1990 can be changed by an act of Parliament. And I got tired of them always using this word Bill of Rights and not clearly announcing which one they were referring to. And it was sneaky, because this one, I called it it was Clark Kent dressed up as Superman. And basically what they were doing is they weren't using New Zealand, they were just using this word here, Bill of Rights. And then they were pretending that they were from our constitutional Subjects Bill of Rights, when in fact they were only from the ordinary law, which is a United Nations immigrants workers' right. That is the difference. So I went in to pray. Okay, that's that. And the case got struck out. Any of you have been following my cases, then you'll know that the case got struck out in the end, okay? But don't worry about that. After I said the prayer, and then Cyclone Gabriel come, because that is exactly what Johnny Cash said. So Johnny Cash said, what did he say? He said, well, look down yonder, Gabriel, put your feet on the land and see. But Gabriel, don't you blow your trumpet until you hear from me. So everybody has heard from me. Now you can have a look here, and this is the 1688 in the UK law. Now, the only reason why I use the New Zealand one, so this is the New Zealand one, the only reason why I use the New Zealand one, hang on, is because it's set out very clearly for you could see all of the sections are set out piece by piece like this and underlined. Where if you go and look at the UK, which this is called the Will and Mary, you can see that it's all mixed up in there together, and it's a bit harder to read, but it says exactly the same thing. But the main point that you want to see is the Prince and Princess of Orange, whom it has pleased Almighty God to make the glorious instrument of delivering this kingdom from popery and arbitrary power. Now, arbitrary power means tyrannical governments. All right, so we all in our common law right went under Almighty God. We didn't go under the king. We went under Almighty God, who was restricted, who gave the king certain powers to protect these rights and restrict Parliament and kings. And so these were our subject rights. And there's many rights in there, the levying of money, the right to petition, but we'll go into those later. So this is on it. So then it goes down to all this jumbled bit. But if you read the New Zealanders one, it's got here the subjects' liberties to be allowed. And it's in the subjects' liberties to be allowed that you are permitted to go to the court, just like I did. You're permitted to go to the court and call any parliamentarian to the court that you want to. And the parliamentarians that I had to call to the court was Jacinda Ardern, and various other ministers. I'd called them to the court to have to get my declaration for a prayer. So you're able to do that through your subjects' liberties to be allowed. Now, I have absolutely proven that you are able to do this, all right? Now, since then, the Gabriel tornado came along, and I've been back and forward with the court because they've said, yes, you can call them, yes, you can do everything that you want to do, but they said, we want you to pay for it. But I said, well, under the 1688 will of Jesus, I call it the will of Jesus, under the 1688 will of Jesus, it says there that we have the right to petition to the king, and it doesn't particularly say which king it is, and it says that all commitments for doing so and prosecutions for doing so are illegal. So I understand that to mean that I can go to the court for the free. So the court said, well, yes, you can come, but you can't go for free. Now, after Cyclone Gabriel came, a thing called the severe weather emergency came out. And so I just want to show to you the important points of the severe weather emergency. Now, one of the important things is it was for the Cyclone Gabriel. And if we remember, what did Johnny Cash say? Johnny Cash said, Gabriel, don't you blow your trumpet until you've heard from me. So the courts have already heard from me, Kate Floss. I've already been to the courts. And then Gabriel has come. And after Gabriel has come, they've written this new legislation, and it's called the Severe Weather Emergency Recovery. Now, it's talking about a lot. It's talking about, most of it is talking about all these areas which are in the North Island of New Zealand, all right? But I wouldn't only focus on that, because there are some essences which are in this bill that apply across the board. Now, this 1688 will of Jesus has always been part of the laws of all of the Commonwealth, but they haven't been using it, and they've been ignoring it because nobody has called it for more than 50 years. It's never been called. And the other thing is, it's to do with changing a lot of laws which are down here. I'll go down to them first and show you, so I don't have to go back to it later. So it wants to be able to change all of the laws in Schedule 2 without having to go to the Parliament and request again and again if they can change it. Now, this is called an omnibus law, and lately, I'll tell you about omnibus in a minute. We'll do this first. So this has got some very strange things to do with the weather response. Like, why would they have the Oaths and Declarations Act of 1957? Why would they have that in there? Why would they have real estate agencies, sale and supply of alcohol? They've got the Te Tua Whenua Maori Act. Now, this is to do with all of the Maori lands in 1993. And then you'll see here that they've got a section here that's been left empty. Now, they don't put that there for no reason. There's going to be something going in there. The Railways Corporation Act is in there. The rates and evaluations are put in there. The Immigration Act is put in there. The Freedom Camping Act is put in there. There's many, many things that are put in there. And the thing is, what we have found in the COVID response, the health response, is they used it for all sorts of things that violated our 1688 will of Jesus. And they got away with all sorts of tyranny. Well, this act has come along and they've said, but there's going to be restrictions this time. And the great thing about these restrictions, so I'll go back up and I'll show you the important points that I want you to know. I didn't want this video to be too long, so it says this is for the Upper North Island and cyclones Hale and the cyclone of Gabriel, but it is an omnibus bill. Now, I do want to tell you about these omnibus bills. The omnibus bills, what they've been doing is they've been ascending legislation to the heavenly realm for the Governor-General's approval, and the Governor-General is sat on the Queen, and she must only approve legislation that upholds our 1688 Will and Mary. My glasses are crooked. I might take them off for a minute. So, what they've been doing is they've been ascending like 10, 20, 30 laws. They write a new law. They're ascending it up to the Governor-General. After they ascend it to the Governor-General, it comes back down to Parliament. Then they group it all together, right? And they send it through Parliament to where they've made specific insertions or deletions and usurpations within each one of those acts that is ascended. They've gone and added a whole bunch of stuff to it that never was ascended, and these are called omnibus bills. And this is their sneaky little way that they've turned around and found a way to sidestep, they thought, to sidestep the Governor-General, sidestep our 1688 Will and Mary and our restrictions, sidestep all of that and insert any legislation that they want, which is tyrannical. And that's how they've been managing to change all our laws, and we don't know what's going on. And so there's been a stopper put on through this, and the stopper that's put on to these omnibus bills, there's going to be more to come, I think, because they're going to have to do it all through. Every single omnibus law is going to have this restriction on it, because if they don't, the parliaments are causing havoc with the people and they're ruling in tyranny. And so I think this is only one of many, many restrictions to be coming. So then the next thing that I wanted to tell you about, this bill provides a power for the Governor-General to make orders in council on the recommendation of the relevant ministers. So that means that the Governor-General can exempt, modify, or extend provisions of certain legislation set out in this bill. That was to do with all that Schedules 2 that I just showed you. But then it says the reference to relevant minister means the Minister of Environment will be the relevant minister only if changes are proposed to the Resource Management Act. But each one of those acts that I just showed you, the relevant minister is going to be able to make recommendations to the Governor-General, all right? And so the Governor-General has then given absolute power to exempt or modify or change any of that without it having to pass correctly in Parliament and by the people. Now, I'm not a lawyer here, so if I get some bits and pieces a little bit wrong, don't go having a panic tantrum and saying Kate Floss is wrong, because I don't know everything, and I'm seriously, absolutely not a lawyer. This is just me as a person, how I read these bills. It says that there are several controls in the bill to provide checks and balances. These checks and balances are more extensive than in previous emergency recovery legislation. Now, this is a fact because, now just be careful here, because when they did the COVID Act, it was all done through the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act of 1990. Now, I'm going to show you in a minute. The New Zealand Bill of Rights 1990 has got a justified limitations, which means it doesn't matter what law is in the United Nations or the human rights, doesn't matter what law, it doesn't matter what law is in that 1990, doesn't matter how protected you think you are, you're not. It's got a justified limitations, and they can change it any time they want, as long as they can justify the restriction or the stop that they want to do it. They can do it at any time that they please. Whereas our 1688 will and Mary, they can't change it. It's absolute, and you're going to see here, they cannot change it, and they cannot work against it. So that all those lockdowns and all of that Health Act was able to be accomplished through the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act, and I call it the Devil's Law. So my 1688 Bill of Rights is the law for Jesus, and the 1990 Bill of Rights Act is the Devil's Law. That's what I'm saying that they are. That's the devil and Jesus fighting against each other right there. Now, it says there are sunset clauses. Sunset clauses just simply means that this entire act will be removed and completely repealed by 2028. So apparently, after 2028, there are going to be no more disasters. And oh no. I've just gone and removed my my act. Oh dear. Oh, and now I've just done something else. Right, just hold your horses. All right, I found that one. And put that one back up there where it belongs. I'm just recording all this in another way, so right now it's all back now. Right, I'll try and fix that for you. All right, I want this to be finished. So I'll put that back up there. All right. So this is going to be repealed. All right. Now I want to hurry through this. The next bit, the key restrictions in the orders, that the order does not breach Clause 11 and does not unjustifiably limit the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. Now, this is a very important thing that I want you to look at here. This is extremely important because it does not breach Clause 11 and then it does not unjustifiably limit the New Zealand Bill of Rights 1990. Well, it just exactly says right there that the New Zealand Bill of Rights 1990 can be changed and can be limited if they can justify doing it. But it cannot breach Clause 11. So let's go and have a look at Clause 11, all right? So then if you go to Clause 11, it says it imposes further restrictions on orders. For example, an order cannot modify a requirement or restriction imposed by certain constitutional statutes. Now you can see here they can change and they can limit as long as it's justified this 1990. But you can see here they cannot breach Clause 11, which is talking about constitutional statutes. And the 1990 BORA is not a constitutional statute. It's an ordinary workers' law. That's what it is, all right? So then you just go down here a bit more, so don't worry about all that. And then the purposes of this act is for the rebuilding of land and for infrastructure and property of affected communities and all of those things. Now, it doesn't just only go on to that. It can be used for all, these are all the areas, but it can be used for all many things. And there's Cyclone Gabriel that I was just talking to you. Now, the orders in council. The Governor-General may make orders of council to any legislation that is in Schedule 2. So they can change any legislation that they want to in the Schedule 2 that I previously showed you, including the oaths, including immigration, whatever thing they want to change, they can do it. But it's got a little sneaky thing down here, because it then says there are some key restrictions on the orders that the Governor-General can make. So the relevant minister must go to the Governor-General, all right? But the minister is restricted by what orders he can send to the Governor-General. And then here is where he's restricted. It says the order does not breach Section 11. And now look here, the order does not limit or is a justified limit on the rights of freedoms in the New Zealand Bill of Rights 1990. So what you can see here is that there are two right here. This one here, I, this is constitutional. And then this one here is not constitutional. This one here has a justified limit. And as long as they can justify the limit or justify the law that they want to make, they can go through this New Zealand Bill of Rights if they want to. But they absolutely cannot breach Section 11. And let's go down to see what's in Section 11. Now, I'll come back to this bit later. It is the order. Now, listen carefully, everybody. Here is Kate Floss. I told you that I was going to ascend this 1688 Bill of Rights by the prayer. The prayer's been answered. I've asked them to elevate it. I've asked them to separate the two of them when they're writing their legislation, and I've asked them to clearly state in my prayer which one that they're talking about. And it clearly states there, one of them is constitutional and cannot be breached, and one of them is not constitutional and it can be breached as long as they have a good justification for doing it. And that was the fourth prayer. That I had two prayers. It's the second and the fourth prayer. The second prayer, I asked them to make clear that this right exists. And then the fourth prayer, I asked them to make clear the difference between the two of them in legislation. And I didn't get my declaration at the court, but I got better than that. They went and put it into legislation for everybody. It's really, really, really amazing. So you can see my prayers. Now, I did get my prayers put into the New Zealand NZLII, is called New Zealand Law Information Institute, New Zealand Legal Information Institute. And they put in their constitutional cases, any cases to do with the Prime Minister, any historical cases, that will go right in there. And that's where they put me, Kate Floss. Well, my name is actually Catherine Sixtus. And that's my name there, Sixtus. I've got three names, Caitlin Waterman, Catherine Sixtus, and Kate Floss, which is my stage name. My stage name is Kate Floss, but my true, indubitable name from my father is Sixtus, and it's a German name. I'm very, very, very proud to say it's a German name, and you'll find out why later. And they put that into the New Zealand Law Information Institute for everybody to go and see. So you'll see the second prayer. I do pray a declaration to the effect clearly stating that the ancient 1688 subject right under Almighty God exists. Boom! I've got that. Then I said, I do pray a declaration that every particular of the New Zealand Parliament and the dispensing of laws would be made clear. It doesn't really kind of say here, but they knew what I was talking about, that the subjects' rights of 1688, which is constitutional and cannot be changed, cannot be breached, and the 1990 Bill of Rights, which is not constitutional and it can be breached, I had asked them in the prayer to make that clear, and that is exactly what they did, and by the things that I just showed you. And here is when section 11, because it says up there that he must not breach, the order does not breach section 11, and only limits in a justified way this other Bill of Rights down here. And then if we go to section 11, here it is, folks. The order must not grant an exemption from or modify a requirement or restriction imposed by the Bill of Rights 1688. Boom, boom, there you have it, folks. And then it says it cannot breach the Constitution Act, the Electoral Act, the Judicial Review Procedure Act. These are all acts. Now, this is what you'll see here, is you'll see here Constitution Act, you'll see here Electoral Act, you'll see here Judicial Review Act, you'll see here New Zealand Bill of Rights Act, you'll see here the Parliamentary Privileges Act. But what you'll see here is that the Bill of Rights 1688 is not an act. It is it's under Almighty God. It's not even a parliamentary document. It is the will of Jesus, and it comes directly from Almighty God, directly for you to be protected. And it cannot be changed. It cannot be breached. It cannot be changed. And they've clearly stated that for us in here after the Cyclone Gabriel came. Very, very interesting. It's biblical. And then it's gone on further. It says that the minister, it says here, all Maori entities. Maori entities include any entity or other body incorporated or unincorporated comprising of or representing a collective group whose members are one or more of the Maori entities. So all Maori entities come into this act, and it says here the minister can nominate all of those, and the minister can make recommendations from them, but the validity of the orders that come out of any of Schedule 2 or any of the recommendations from those Maori entities, it is all subject to Section 11. This puts all New Zealand Maori entities, all Governor-Generals, all ministers, all courts, all everybody under Section 11, that they cannot breach the Bill of Rights 1688. Now, I've still got to go and teach you how to use it, but I'm just saying that when you go to use it, you can print this severe weather emergency recovery. You can print it, and you can say, yes, this is a law because it's in this one here, so you can use it for other things as well. Does not only apply, because this 1688, so the 1688 Will and Mary has always been with us in all of our Anglo-Saxon countries. It's been with us forever and ever. It's in our passport. It travels with us everywhere we go. But we have forgotten our power. We, people, have forgotten our power. And we've forgotten how to take the Parliament to the court and hold them to account. We've forgotten how to do that. And so just because it's been put in here doesn't mean that it didn't exist. But my point was that they were not promoting it, and we had forgotten that it does exist. So, if you need proof, and people think to yourself, people say, "Oh, that's a 1688 law, and it doesn't apply to this day and this time in this year of 2023." You can say, You can see here that it's just come up in the legislation in the 2023 legislation, so we know that it still exists. So that's why I wanted them to do that. So all the Maoris have to uphold it as well, and they're all subject. And then it goes on one more. Any orders in council may specify additional acts. Now, do you remember where I went down there? Now, I'm going to tell you something important. Right down the bottom there, I showed you that there was an empty space. And what it says is that they can add additional acts if they want to, but it goes on to say they can only add those acts to Schedule 2. Only the minister can make the recommendation as long as the order in council does not breach Section 11A through to D. Now, Section 11A through to D has that they can't modify custodies, detentions, orders of the court, orders of the judges, orders of the registrar. They can't modify any of those. They cannot grant exemptions from custody or detentions. They can't do any of that because that's all for the courts. But they also cannot breach our 1688, our Bill of Rights 1688, and then all of these other here acts, they cannot breach any of those either, although they certainly can make orders under the one that they cannot change the 1986 Constitution without a court order. They cannot change the Electoral Act or the judicial procedure. They can't do that, or the parliamentary privilege. But they can modify and change and restrict and do anything that they want with this New Zealand 1990 Devil's Immigration Law. They can do that if they choose to, if they can justify it. Right? So now, so that is that there. Now, you might be wondering, well, why is Kate Floss showing this? I've gone and lost my thing again now. Here it is. Okay, back up there. I'm in the camera here, so. All right, so you might be wondering why I'm focused on this section here, that they can add a law, right? It's a very, very heavily restricted law. Now, Sue Gray and some of the others, wow, Jacinda Ardern, Sue Gray, all of the people, I call them the Antichrist, because they've all been diligently working against our 1688 Bill of Rights or Will of Jesus for many, many decades now. All of them have been working against it, and that's why I call them the Antichrist, because our Will of Jesus, 1688 is the Will of Jesus. Call them the Antichrist. Now, since this came out, they've been seared with the cross, and they're all upset about it, and they're going to be telling you lies. So let me show you what the lies that they're telling you are, because they want rid of it. And why do they want rid of it? Well, I'll tell you why they want rid of it, because they can no longer rule tyrannically and do anything they want. They've restricted. Now, this is the legislation. They're talking about the severe weather emergency recovery is rush legislation that reeks of stupidity. Now, you can go and read this. I'll try and post it up with the YouTube. And he said this emergency management got passed by Minister Kieran McNulty, who's really, really helped us out. He's got a history to New Zealand of many, 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 many decades, and he's come off the ships. And then it says, the bill, this is what they reckon. Lawyers and legal academics decried the process for the legislation. The lawyers that they're talking about are Sue Gray. The bill allows the government to bypass parts of other legislation as it progresses with the cyclone recovery. Those pieces of legislation are listed in the bill, but the government has the ability to add to the list after the bill is passed without having to go back to Parliament. An extraordinary power. The bill only applies to affect areas affected by the cyclone, although it has been drafted in such a way that it includes the North Island and Wellington. And McNulty says he acknowledged the bill has been progressed with great speed. Now that is just a little sneaky thing that they're saying to you, because you can clearly see here that even if they bring in a new legislation, it is still subjected to all of those heavy restrictions. Now, I'm telling you, that 1688 is a very restrictive law. They can't give money to any old thing that they want to. They can't take any land from you. There's got a forfeiture of person without conviction, means they cannot take your land. They cannot allocate money to some groups and not allocate it to other groups. They cannot govern their money in secrecy. Not even the Maori entities can do anything they like with their money in secrecy. It all has to be put up for the public to scrutinise. There are many things. So he's turned around and said that the pieces of legislation are listed in the bill, but the government has the ability to add to the list after it's passed, and he reckons that they won't be subject to the legislation, but they will, because that legislation is always there, but it's just that people have not recognised it, and now they will. So there you go. Now, he said that now this Dean Knight, who belongs to I won't say, but he belongs to a certain male group who like to meet with other male groups in the dark of night. And that's why his name's called Dean Knight, because he's a night person and he meets with men in the night. If you know what I mean. Nudge, wink, wink. So Dean Knight meets with other men in the night. And so, he's very pro 1990 Bill of Rights, and he's very anti 1688 Will and Mary, very anti, and we all know why. So he submitted that there were issues with the content of the bill and the process used to enact it. In a written submission, Knight said the bill enables ministers through the Henry VIII powers to modify, extend, or override primary legislation by orders in council in affected areas and regions and districts. He said, these are extraordinary powers in our constitutional context, he said. Knight said these powers were not uncommon in emergency legislation, but they needed checks and balances that were adequate to mitigate any potential misuse. A Henry VIII power means the legislation delegates the power to ministers to make sweeping changes without resorting back to Parliament. The powers would be more traditionally be dealt with by introducing a new round of legislation. Constitutional expert and lawyer Graham Edgeley described the process as more than unfortunate. Edgeley was also critical of the Henry VIII powers in the bill. I consider that the process is more than unfortunate. I'm particularly concerned about the Henry VIII clause in the bill, which should be avoided wherever possible. In particular, I consider that the ability to add new laws to those which may be affected should be removed. Edgeley said the committee should, and blah, blah, blah. Some other things. Now, this is absolutely not the case. What is the Henry VIII clause? The Henry VIII clause was that previously to when they first previous to having Parliament, they had kings, and then they set up a Parliament that was governed partially by the people, governed by the barons and the religious leaders and all of that. But the king still held absolute power. And when Parliament made a legislation, Henry VIII was able to override that legislation. And what he did was he kept overriding the legislation. Now, some people think that he overrode the legislation because the religious leaders were making legislation that was in their favour and moving towards having the king removed so that they could rule tyrannically and make any laws that they wanted. So that's why he would override, because Henry VIII was governed by the 1688. Now, or maybe he wasn't, maybe I've got my kings wrong. But if you go and have a look on the 1688 Bill of Rights, oh, now I've lost it, oh dear. Here it is. Just a minute, let me just fix this. Right, so if you look at the 1688 Bill of Rights here, it's supposed to be 15 minutes, but oh well. It's got a clause down here. And so this law here is called a non-obstance made void. Now, a lot of people don't quite understand non-obstance made void. I'm not going to explain it to you. I have done videos on it. But basically, the non-obstance made void meant that no king could come in and override any legislation, or he could not make any laws that were repugnant to these protections here. So here's the levying of money, but they're not allowed to use it for any purpose that they want. Here's the freedom of speech, but the most importantly, here's the grants and forfeitures, and this is to do with your land, that they cannot forfeit anything of any particular person without a conviction against you that you've done something wrong. So this stops them from taking your land, is what that stops. Then you've got your freedom of speech. This means that members of the Maori are not permitted to force you to stop speaking within the meetings. There's a very, very good one here, which is the supremacy law, and this forbids no authority, ecclesiastical or spiritual, ought to have any authority, jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence within this realm. This is the karikira where they want to do prayers in your council meetings. That's illegal because we don't know what prayers they're saying, and we don't know what God that they're praying to, and we don't know what are the laws of that God that they're placing over you when they say the prayer. So that's why they're not allowed to do that. So if you knew your 1688, so the non-obstant clause was to prevent either Parliament or Henry VIII or anybody else from either making legislation that was repugnant to our 1688, or from overriding legislation which was in harmony with our 1688. So legislation, any legislation that is in harmony with the 1688, the king must pass it. The Governor-General must ascend it. But any legislation which is repugnant to our 1688, the Governor-General must not pass it. It cannot ascend. And if it does ascend, then the Governor-General is the one that's held accountable. And then that's the Governor-General's office that's got to pay all the money. So, and I think it comes out of the Crown Law pocket. I don't think it comes out of our taxes in our pocket. It comes out of their pocket because they ascended it when they shouldn't have. So that was what prevented the Henry VIII clause from continuing to override. So they came to a compromise. The Parliament said, we don't want Henry VIII overriding our parliamentary legislation. And Henry VIII said, I don't want you making legislation that is repugnant to the will of Mary. So they came to an agreement that Parliament could not do that, and it all worked out that the Parliament kept a check on the King kept a check on the Parliament. And the church, what was the church's role in all of this? They, when they noticed that the parliamentarians and the kings and the governor-generals were working together and passing laws that were repugnant to God, the church was supposed to go to the Supreme Court and make the prayer to have that legislation put in its place. That is the church's job, and that's why they were separated, because they had the highest order. They had the highest order under the 1688, which was under Almighty God, because you started your court document with the words, because it tells you here, it says here, where's Liberties? It says here, where does it say that you start with I do pray? Well, I can't find it here. I'll show it to you another time. Anyway, you start your court document with a prayer, and you say, I do pray. And when you do pray. So that's just a little update letting you know where we are with all of this. And Johnny Cash has done us a great service with his thing on Gabriel. And I'll just play it one more for the end of the video. We want to thank Johnny Cash. And I've been listening to a lot of Johnny Cash videos, but this is the one that I love. Have a listen to Johnny Cash. Now, this song is becoming very popular, and I'm going to explain to you why. So here's what he says. Goodbye.
There ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. When I hear the trumpet sound, I'm gonna rise right out of the ground. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, look way down the river. What do you think I see? I see a band of angels, and they're coming after me. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, look down yonder, Gabriel. Put your feet on the land and see. But Gabriel, don't you blow your trumpet till you hear from me. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, meet me, Jesus, meet me. Meet me in the middle of the air. And if these wings don't fail me, I will meet you anywhere. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, meet me, mother and father. Meet me down the river road. And mama, you know that I'll be there when I check in, my Lord. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down.
As you can see, there are many things there. All right, Kate Floss signing out.